At approximately 1:36 a.m. in the city of Greeley, Colorado, police were alerted to a suburb under the pretenses of what was described as a home invasion. Upon arrival, they discovered no evidence of burglary within the home. However, when they searched the master bedroom, they found the body of 41-year-old Martin Vassis, a local electrician. The body had been severely mutilated, with the head being completely ripped off from the torso and the abdominal region being eviscerated from the inside out. Medical examinations of the body were inconclusive in determining what the victim had been killed by, and forensics testing failed to provide any insight into the identity of the assailant. The only evidence authorities found was a crumpled note in the victim's shirt pocket. The note appeared to be hastily written, and it read as follows. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Can you hear the sound of the clock? Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound of a record playing in your thoughts. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Did the oven turn on, or has your mind gone amok? Tick-tock, tick-tock. Stop. The noise has stopped. And now she knocks. Do you know what that means? Miss Jane has arrived to say hello. If you truly value your pathetically empty life, do not upset her. Ever. The case is still currently being investigated. All potential leads have run cold. Perhaps. Should they wait for her next visit? Monday, the start of another week. The start of schedules, jobs, and the taxing grinds of modern society. What a small mercy, then, that night had fallen. The door creaked and groaned as it was pushed open, the meager decorations and furniture of the quiet little house silently greeting its occupant. The man walked to the center of the living room, and with a weary sigh, he resigned himself to the embrace of the old battered couch. It had been another long day, and soon another would fall. Another sigh escaped the man, which reflected on the day he had. It was uneventful, as always, working in IT and completing the weekly reporter project. Occasionally, he would help someone with a tech issue, but those were few and far between. He got up and trudged to the kitchen, his stomach quiet, yet his mind troubled. He opened the door to the fridge, hunger an absent thought.
Shit.
He said aloud. He forgot to go grocery shopping. Again. After a few seconds, he closed the door with a slight slam and retreated back to the solace of the couch. Another sigh escaped his chest as he sat down once again, and began to ponder his troubled thoughts.
Another long day, another to follow. It's alright though, things are solid for the most part. And soon the weekend will be here. Everything will be alright.
He knew he was lying, he just didn't know what he was lying about. He had a stable job, a cozy house, a warm bed, and friends to talk with, except he couldn't remember the last time he saw his friends. Brushing aside his disheveled brown hair, he dug out his phone out of his front pocket and went to his text and began to read through old messages. He scrolled through an assortment of group chats and DMs on his phone until he found his main group chat, titled The Idiocratic Democracy. Seeing the name made him chuckle softly, and for a brief moment he was overcome with a wave of nostalgia. He remembered the nights spent with his friends from university, whether at restaurants, bars, or someone's dorm, laughing with his buddies over dumb inside jokes and externally raging over Mario Kart on their shared console. Truly, those were simpler times, and he was rewarded with a sense of calm as he began to relive his college days. It brought a smile to his face to remember all of the times 5 months. He paused, and with a trembling finger he reread the timestamp on the most recently sent text message. It couldn't have been that. 5 fucking months. He stared at his phone, his mind numb from the disturbing truth that had been right under his nose the entire time. 5 whole months since he had even seen his friends, or anyone he knew for that matter. He wanted to talk to them. He wanted to catch up with them and ask how things were, but he couldn't. He shouldn't. If 5 months had passed without anyone saying anything, then it wouldn't matter if he decided to say something to the group. What good would it do anyway? 5 months. Shit. He looked at the date of the last text sent, almost a month after she died. His eyes got misty. The corners of his mouth started trembling with flutters of grief and remorse, his solid facade lightly cracking at the seams.
Why did it have to be her?
He thought bitterly, not daring to speak, knowing that once he did, he would have to confront what he had been avoiding for months.
Adriana.
Her name was bittersweet, harsh yet gentle, a symphony yet also light like a melody. Adriana was. That's what death was. The removal of presence and matter, an is to a was. Emmanuel and Adriana met in college. They had been assigned together in a group project for their computing class. What started out as an obligation for a decent grade turned into something real. They talked outside of class, went to lunch together, not for a study session, but rather out of enjoyment. Adriana then introduced him to her friends, and that's where it all started. Because of her, he had friends. Because of her, he enjoyed college. Because of her, he started seeing the little wonders in everyday life. Until it wasn't so wonderful anymore. A year after they graduated, Adriana got diagnosed with stage 3 leukemia. At first, it wasn't noticeable. She had been getting sick more often. She blamed it on her allergies and her shitty immune system. If only she knew how true that actually was. She couldn't go out anymore, not even to work. She had started to work remotely because she could barely leave her house without the possibility of fainting. Random bruising on her limbs because she constantly bumped into things when she did have the energy to move. Her doctor had said that she had a very good survival rate, that she would make it. He obviously didn't see how she looked, or else he would have done more for her. He didn't see her eye bags that made it obvious that she hadn't slept, or the swelling in her joints that went from painful to debilitating in weeks. He didn't see it. A tear rolled down his face as he remembered her smile. Her laugh. The way she brightened a room as she walked in, as he remembered her. She was the glue that held the group together. A little less than a month after she died, the texts that had once frequented the group chats were phantoms. Spirits. Ghosts of what used to be. He looked at the clock on his wall and saw that it read just a little past 8 o'clock. Wiping his face, he reached for the TV remote on his stained coffee table. Ring marks of old mugs and drinks sat inlaid on the old grainy oak wood, each one a delicate and specific memory to the parties he'd hosted, to the deep talks he had with neighbors and family, even simple moments like falling asleep on the couch with a movie on. He mindlessly flipped through the programs on his prepaid cable television. He had begun to wish that life wasn't so depressingly cruel. Everything he used to care about had drifted away because of change, so why even try to fix things? Time and change are both uncaring and unstoppable forces, slowly devouring the past and spinning out the future no matter how cruel or brutal it tended to be. He stopped his channel search on a cooking show, one he'd watched before but never paid much mind to. He sat alone as the world around him slowly faded away as exhaustion enveloped him, slowly drifting into the gentle lull of slumber. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The man awoke to the clicking of his clock, and as he rubbed sleep from his eyes, he saw that the hands were pointed at 12 o'clock. Damn. He swore he wouldn't fall asleep on the couch again. Guess there's always next time. He slowly got up from the couch, the old thing creaking and moaning as his weight shifted off of it, and he began to make his way upstairs to take a shower. When he stopped halfway, tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock slowly sang its rhythmic melody. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Something felt off. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Scratch that. Something was off. He looked over the railing. Nothing seemed out of place. So he began walking back up when he stopped in his tracks. He left his phone on the couch. He begrudgingly walked back down the stairs and over to the couch, snatching his phone from the couch cushion. His phone was cold in his grasp. As he turned to go back up, He paused. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Without thinking or seemingly knowing why, he reached up to the wall and took the clock off the mount and took out the batteries. Something about the clock was unnerving him, but he really didn't want to think about it right now, not after the emotions he had unwillingly just processed. He turned to go back upstairs. Tick-tock, tick-tock.
What the hell?
He looked at the clock. The batteries were definitely out, and yet the clock was somehow still ticking.
It's probably just bringing out the remaining charge from the batteries. No big deal. It's fine.
He went to the kitchen, skipping steps on the way down. He set the clock down onto the kitchen table, leaning against his empty fruit bowl. As he went to walk back upstairs, he heard something. Orchestral music? He stood 1 foot perched on the first step, transfixed, listening to the music play, caught in a moment of bliss and peace. It was canorous, the singing of strings, the whistling of the woodwinds, the blaring of the brasses, and the drumming beats of the percussion.
Nature out of the wood. I've loved this.
He thought.
When did I get a record player?
He looked around, quickly banishing that thought from his mind. His eyes raced as he checked every corner of his living room, and what came to be an obvious conclusion. He never owned a record player.
This is probably just a dream. Yeah, it's a dream. I'm asleep, and I will wake up any minute now. It's time to go back to sleep, and...
He stopped.
What the hell is that smell?
Taking his foot off the step, he slowly lumbered through his living room and stood at the entryway to his kitchen. The oven was running. He rushed over and he tried to shut off the oven, but no matter how hard he tried, the damn knobs wouldn't budge. Panic, a desperate, hungry animal, now sunk its teeth into him, his heart pounding as he rushed around the kitchen looking for something, anything, that might explain as to what was happening. The clock was ticking, a record was playing, and the oven was running. Something or someone was in his house, messing with him. He was beginning to lose it. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Time seemed to speed up somehow. No, impossible. Time was a fixed concept. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. Constant that he could always rely on was crumbling right before him. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock went faster, matching his racing thoughts. Everything was wrong, so incredibly wrong. The man's turbulent thoughts rolled around in his skull like a hurricane, the winds not quite escaping, pounding, drilling into him. Alarms blared, red flashing lights and sirens all occurred in his head. If it wasn't so alarming at the time, he might have gained a headache from it. He took out his phone. He began dialing 911, but he realized everything was... quiet now. The ticking, the music, and the oven had all stopped. It was so deadly quiet now. He collapsed onto a bar stool nearby his kitchen island, his relieved breaths disturbing the silence of the night. It was over now.
I think it's time to go. Fuck.
Good evening, Emmanuel. It's so wonderful to meet you, D.U.R.E. A honeyed, haunting voice greeted Emmanuel. He whipped around wildly.
Who the fuck just said that?
A splintering crack resounds behind Emmanuel, and his head snaps to the source of the noise. His doorframe was fracturing. Fucking fracturing. He took a step back once he noticed the cracks in the solid wood had begun seeping black shadows, oozing from the fissures like cold air filtering through a broken window. His doorframe was no longer a comfortable cream color. It was starting to change from cream to gray, gray into pitch black, and pitch black into nothing. The door started to disappear as a dark, shadowy cloud formed in front of it. The cloud slowly contouring into the semblance of a silhouette. The figure began to take shape. Fingers, no, claws, started to become visible. a long, flowy dress drooping to the floor, and beneath that, a long tail of black curling not only around the figure, but behind it as well. In the doorway, framed by darkness, stood an abnormally tall woman. She was wearing a solid black Victorian-era dress decorated with flowers and buttons, and upon her hands she wore a detailed gold ring on each finger. Her skin was deathly pale, her hair as black as tar. Her head carried a massive felt sun hat with rose detailing along the brim that sat like a crooked crown upon her head. Emmanuel looked down slightly. Where there should have been eyes, a mouth, nose, and lips, there was but a void over her face, almost as if the darkness itself was hiding her appearance. Her arms were unnaturally long and spindly, and each of her fingers carried a blood-red nail that was polished to a shine and sharpened to a lethal edge, like she could cut by just pointing a finger. Emmanuel scrambled away, desperate to try and escape whatever the hell he was seeing. His back slammed against the wall, knocking the wind out of his chest, and when he looked at the lady again, she was slowly stepping closer to him. Except she didn't walk. From beneath her long flowing dress, Emmanuel watched as her body extended out of the darkness like a serpent rising out of its nest from the ground. All of his cabinets and drawers opened with a loud thump all at once. Long, spindly arms began to extend out from each drawer and cabinet, seemingly from nowhere and reach around the house. Arms just like hers, crooked and fatal. The monstrous lady slowly slithered over towards Emmanuel, who had now slumped to the ground in a ball and had his head buried in his arms like a frightened child. The terrifying lady clasped her hands, tilted her head, and slowly shook it in mock disappointment. She leaned down, clasped her left hand around his face, bringing his face closer to hers, and spoke, terrifying vocals echoing through both the house and his mind alike.
Emmanuel. Emmanuel, please look at me, dearie.
Begrudgingly, Emmanuel met her gaze. As he looked up at the woman, her hands softly cupping his cheek, light glimmered off of her polished nails. She slowly started to bring him up from his knees and back onto his feet, never once looking away from his direction. He got to his feet, trying his best to keep himself from appearing frightened by the lady's sudden appearance. He stood and looked at the mysterious lady, his eyes taken aback just by how massive she was compared to him. Her human-like body had already looked well over 6.5 feet tall, but the serpent portion coming out from behind her seemed to stretch on without limit, still connected to the black cracks in the doorframe. Just how long did her tail go?
Stay calm. Stay fucking calm. Don't do anything stupid, Emmanuel. Just ask her why she is here, and go from there. Just breathe and stay calm. What the hell are you?
He said with a hint of bitterness and fear.
Fuck.
His throat tightened as the lady, now towering over him, tipped her head down to look at him directly. She tilted his face around as if to get a good look at him. Emmanuel couldn't see her face, so he wasn't exactly sure what she was doing. Once again he began to panic, and he quickly began babbling out a hasty reply.
I mean, you know, who are shit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, I swear,
A pale hand gently caressed his right shoulder. He flinched for a moment, but relaxed as soon as she started pulling both of her hands away. The lady clasped her hands in front of what would have been her waist, and spoke in a composed tone.
Do not apologize, dearie. You have not offended me in any manner as of right now, and do take my word when I say that I normally anticipate situations like these to occur.
She paused, and she withdrew a few feet from Emmanuel. Emmanuel looked to the door, and then back at her, and spoke with a little bit more composure.
Huh? Excuse me? Ma'am?
Her head angled back down to him, her hands still clasped in front of her body.
Yes, dearie.
Do you, what is your name?
A few seconds passed when suddenly the lady threw her hands over her face and leaned back in a manner of embarrassment and drama.
May the Lord forgive me. Where are my manners? My sincerest apologies, dearie. I am absolutely mortified that I forgot to give my introduction.
With an unexpected grace, she straightened her body, spread her long arms, and gave a fluid bow to the now quite confused Emmanuel, and there was a hint of a delicate British accent with each syllable she spoke.
My name is Jane Elizabeth Madeline Elliot, daughter of the elusive Richard Elliot and Meredith Elliot, but you may call me Miss Jane. I originally was an esteemed resident of the glorious Elliot Manor and its assorted estates, but as you can see, things have somewhat changed for me.
She spoke like this was practiced many times before.
Alas, such matters are unimportant for now. What matters is that you are my dearest guest, and I shall take it upon myself to provide you with the most wonderful time tonight. Please, have a seat, dearie, while I prepare a meal for us to enjoy.
Emmanuel looked over at the couch and once again looked back to Miss Jane. As kind as the offer was, this was technically his house, and Miss Jane was technically his guest. This whole situation was getting weirder by the minute, and he was starting to get a little annoyed by this unwelcome intrusion.
I appreciate the offer.
He stopped himself from saying ma'am. At least his parents taught him how to address a lady.
Miss Jane, but I'm...
Hungry? Yes, dear, I can hear your stomach aching from here.
She moved closer to Emmanuel, and once again he was met with a similar feeling from earlier.
You have obviously not eaten tonight, and that is absolutely unacceptable for any guest of mine.
As she spoke, the air itself seemed to drop in temperature, a reflection of her now icy tone.
Now please, sit down, Emmanuel, and allow me to cook you a delicious meal. After all, you are my guest for the night.
With a shaky nod, Emmanuel walked back over to the couch and took his seat as the massive form of Miss Jane slithered into his kitchen. As Emmanuel slumped on his couch, he heard what sounded like singing. As he listened closer, he realized it was Miss Jane. He closed his eyes and allowed the singing of the mysterious lady to lull him into slumber once again.
Emmanuel, dearie, it is time to wake up.
Emmanuel opened his heavy eyes to see the sight of Miss Jane in front of him holding a tray with a steaming dish on it. He sat up with a start. The entire living room had changed as well. Elegant paintings and vases with flowers covered the walls and desks, and the walls had switched from being a drabby beige to a rich shade of maroon. In the corner of the room, there stood a lamp as long as he was tall, finely embroidered and polished as all the other decorations in the room.
Come, dearie, we have to sit at the table while we eat.
Her tone indicated that there was a soft smile on her face. Shame it couldn't be seen. As Miss Jane set the tray down on the kitchen table, he noticed that the hands that had sprouted out of his drawers and cabinets earlier were now gone.
Did those hands remodel my entire house? This has to be a dream. There's no way. That can't just... How the fuck?
He noticed she's staring right at him. Right, she's waiting on him. Emmanuel followed her to the kitchen, still taking in everything those hands had done to his house. Was this permanent? He kind of wished so. The sliding of a plate broke his reverie, and he looked over at Miss Jane as she handed him utensils, a napkin, and a cup of what seemed to be tea.
Please, go ahead and eat, dearie.
He took a while to look over his plate, which appeared to be some type of casserole. He clutched his fork with a trembling hand and took a bite. He was overwhelmed by a barrage of savory flavors. He tasted potatoes, cheese, garlic, carrots, peas, gravy, and what he believed was lamb meat. Before he knew it, he had already cleaned his plate, and to Miss Jane's delight, he found himself asking for another serving. He spoke through mouthfuls of food, trying not to make a mess.
Miss Jane, this is wonderful. Hell, not even my grandma's cooking can hold up to what you've made.
Miss Jane raised a hand to cover her mouth and turned her head to the side in an attempt to hide her face. She spoke to him, failing to hide the fluster in her voice.
Oh, you are such a sweetheart, dearie. I'm absolutely delighted that you appreciate my cooking. I was never that good, but I always made sure that my guests would have a warm meal to eat. That dish right there is my personal recipe for shepherd's pie.
She turned back to him, this time an array of pastries and baked goods resting upon the tray.
Would you care for a blueberry muffin? Or how about a hazelnut cookie? I could also bake a cake for us if you would like it so, dearie.
Emmanuel looked at the tray and felt his stomach rumble in agreement.
That all sounds wonderful, Miss Jane. If you could make a shepherd's pie like this, I'm sure you'd make one hell of a cake.
She smiled. At least, Emmanuel had the feeling she was smiling. It was kind of hard to judge her mood given the lack of a face, but she seemed to be really happy right now.
If I keep it this way, hopefully this dream will be over soon, but what if this isn't a dream? What the fuck am I supposed to do then?
Miss Jane rose up, and she went back to the kitchen. And almost immediately, Emmanuel could hear the sound of batter being made and Miss Jane singing. Emmanuel did not know what time it was, the clock from earlier being mysteriously missing from his house, nor he knew how much time had passed. But this fact did not concern him anymore. For what seemed like hours, he and Miss Jane sat in their remodeled living room talking like old friends. She had made a cup of tea for them both, and she didn't mind it when he asked for more sugar in his tea than hers. Damned college coffee ruined his taste buds. Although he was still skeptical of her, Miss Jane had only been kind and empathetic to him. She sat and listened to him talk about his life and the struggles he dealt with on a day-to-day basis. The more they spoke, the less Emmanuel was afraid of her, and the evening was filled with friendly banter. Miss Jane began to tell him stories about her own life, and Emmanuel learned that she would always invite guests into her home and serve them meals. She said that she did this because she always wanted to meet new people, and she was apparently so loved that the kids had taken to calling her Granny Jane and the adults referring to her as Lady Jane. She would in turn call all of the children and families she met her dearies. Finally, after Miss Jane had finished recounting a story about a haunted kettle, she turned to Emmanuel, and her next words were spoken in a concerned manner.
Emmanuel, dearie, I must ask you a rather impertinent question.
Emmanuel looked up from the slice of cake he was eating, and he became somewhat apprehensive at the phrasing of the statement.
What is it, Miss Jane?
Miss Jane paused for a moment, placing her teacup down on a no longer stained coffee table. The fingers of her hands fiddled with the assortment of rings upon her digits.
Emmanuel, I can tell that something is bothering you.
Emmanuel looked back at Miss Jane, his apprehension turning into anxiety as he began to pick up on where she was going.
No offense, Miss Jane, but that isn't really a question.
A moment of silence passed, the tension of the room growing as Miss Jane turned her whole body to face Emmanuel. Her arms crossed over her chest, and she tilted her head to the side as she gave her reply.
Then allow me to rephrase my statement then. Emmanuel, what is bothering you?
Seconds crawled by as Emmanuel sat on the couch, sweat beginning to poke through his brow as he struggled to find the words Miss Jane wanted to hear.
Well, I had a pretty long day at work, and we have a big sales meeting Thursday, and I'm overdue for a doctor's.
Emmanuel.
Miss Jane delicately cut off his rambling as she loomed over him, hands uncrossing and cupping his face, a hand on each side.
Please do not lie to me, dearie. I only wish to help you. I value all of my guests, and I do everything I can to ensure that they are as happy as they can be. But I need you to be honest with me. Now please, dearie, what is bothering you?
With a great effort, Emmanuel lifted his eyes to meet her gaze, and he let out another weary sigh.
I don't really know how to say it, but things just don't feel right to me anymore. I thought after I left college, I'd be able to make a life for myself, and I did manage to get what I needed to make it through the weeks, but something kept bothering me. Something just kept nagging at my mind that I wasn't doing things right.
He paused, his head falling back down as his voice became quieter.
I was checking my phone tonight, and I was thinking of catching up with my old friends, but I didn't realize that the last time I spoke to my friends, the last time any of us spoke to each other was 5 months ago. It's hard for me to
He stuttered, remembering Adriana.
I don't know why, but I feel like a piece of shit. We all promised to stay in contact after we left college, and we managed it for a good while. But that's when it happened. Adriana. She lost her fight with leukemia, and that's when everything just stopped. Doesn't fucking matter anymore, though. They probably moved on, don't remember who I am, or want to see me again. It's just probably best I just forget.
Tears descended Emmanuel's face as he sat in a melancholy silence. Miss Jane stared at him, quietly observing him. Her hands dropped down to her lap, gently falling into one another. She stared off into the distance for a while, as if figuring out what she wanted to say and how to say it. When she spoke, she was quieter than before, and there was a touch of grief in her voice.
When I was still a normal lady of my time, I would always open the doors of my manor to the people of the streets. It did not matter where they were from, who they were, or whether they were rich or poor. I always kept the doors open so I could meet new guests, and I would always ensure they were given the best visit they could ask for. I met so many new people, heard so many interesting tales, and was loved by so many. Alas, things were not as ideal as I had hoped for, and I soon found my hopes impeded.
She briefly paused, her voice now began to take a colder tone.
My husband, Oswald, was repulsed by my actions and guests that I catered to. He said I was tainting the very soil of our land by inviting mongrel filth onto our estate. I tried to sway his views, but he was stubborn, and he forbade me from allowing any more guests into the manor to visit. However, he never forbade me from going to visit the people, and that is exactly what I chose to do for the next 10 years.
Another pause. This time, Emmanuel watched as she coiled in on herself, her hands clasped together with such a force that it looked like her knuckles would rip through her skin. Her voice was now as cold as an endless blizzard, and sharper than a serrated knife. She spoke, each word uttered with barely restrained fury and contempt.
It was not enough. My husband was still disgusted by me and my actions, and he began to spread the most dreadful rumors about me. Such acts hurt my very soul, yet I continued to bring generosity and compassion to the dear people of my community. The cycle dragged on for many weeks, until one night, me and Oswald attended a reunion party held by one of his friends. Once the mood had settled, he took his chance to publicly defame me in front of his gathered peers, calling me a worthless whore who had grown intoxicated with the filthy beggars and peasants of society.
She turned away now, and Emmanuel swore he saw tears falling from her face and onto the cold floor.
These words, spoken by my own husband, nothing had ever caused me more pain in my entire existence. Once his tirade had concluded, a person in the audience had asked him if what he said was the truth. I gave the answer for him, and I said that what he said was true only if Oswald himself admitted to being a lousy, flea-bitten, impotent, sanctimonious, sexist, neurotic drunken of a man who is an affront to everything a person should be. Needless to say, he did not appreciate my words. And the last thing I remember that night was the angry wail of a worthless man and the cold touch of a knife as it buried itself into my chest.
Miss Jane stopped and turned back to face Emmanuel, who looked at her with an empathetic and nervous expression. Where she once appeared terrifying and intimidating, she now looked weak and crushed. Emmanuel felt an overwhelming urge to console her. He spoke to her, his voice hushed as the weight of her words cut into his heart.
Miss Jane, your husband,
He did. He did right in front of everyone. What should have been a night marked by joy and rekindled connections was instead marked by the screams of the masses, the shouts of policemen, and the blood of a shattered and defamed woman. To this day, the tragedy of that night echoes through my heart. All I ever wanted was to bring love and compassion to those who were in need, but Mankind is not a species of angels, and my kindness was met with cruelty by one bitter man. I do not know how I became like this, but I remember that as I lay bleeding on the floor, a man wearing a black trench coat approached me. He took my hand and he whispered in my ear, "Mankind is cruel, Jane. Fret not, for you shall return, and soon many shall remember thy name." I do not know how much time had passed, but when I awoke, I was...
The sentence remained unfinished as Miss Jane looked away, lost in a storm of thoughts that clouded her tortured mind. Another tense silence fell upon the air, and the fire that Miss Jane had once carried had burned into faded embers as her silence betrayed her sorrows. Slowly, Emmanuel carefully scooted his way over to Miss Jane on a still croaky couch, his weariness and fears gone. He spoke, each word chosen with care.
Miss Jane, I'm so sorry for you. I don't really know what else I can say. But for what it's worth, you never deserved what happened that night. You never deserved to be...
His throat tightened at the sight of her turning to face him, and he barely managed to whisper the end of his reply.
hurt or changed. But you deserved better.
He corrected himself.
You do deserve better. Yeah.
Miss Jane stared down at him, her body as still as a statue, her hands no longer white-knuckling each other. Once again as she spoke, her tone concealed and well-practiced.
What happened to me? I do not understand how or why I became what I am now, but it is of no concern to me. I may no longer be the lady I was in the past, but my soul stands strong within my being. Life is a test for all, but that does not mean we must face it alone. Sometimes, all we want, all we need, is someone to talk to, someone to listen to us, and someone to share a nice meal with. I may have changed, but I still wish to help others as I once did. And at the end of the day, that is all I've ever wanted. You should know this, Emmanuel.
She moved closer to him. He did not flinch as Miss Jane rested a hand upon his right shoulder.
There can be times where the light of the past seems dim, and the memories become whispers in your mind. It may seem like life can be unforgiving, and that change unravels all that we hold dear. But at the end of the day, week, month, or year, we do not know until we try. Not everyone I have visited is as comfortable with me as you are. But do you really think that stops me from trying?
She paused slightly, and slowly placed her other hand upon his other shoulder.
We cannot control change, but we can choose how to live with it. All that matters is that we recognize the choices we are given.
For what seemed an eternity, both figures sat in silence and stillness, both lost in the recollection of their lives and the night that they spent together. Suddenly, Emmanuel slowly lifted his arms around Miss Jane and embraced her in a tired hug. She stiffened at the surprise action, and for a few moments Emmanuel wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Then he felt the embrace of Miss Jane as her long, pale arms wrapped around his body and pulled him into a tight, yet gentle embrace, the rest of her serpent body coiling around him in a protective manner. Her flesh was cold like ice, yet the warmth her spirit emitted was almost palpable as Emmanuel sat in her embrace. They sat there for a while, and whether it was a few seconds, minutes, or hours, neither are exactly sure. Miss Jane was the one to break the silence. Her voice choked with emotion as she spoke in whispers.
It has been so long since I remembered what a hug felt like. You should not.
It's the least I could do, Miss Jane. You've done a lot for me tonight, and I think that right now for the both of us could definitely use a hug.
The silence returned for another minute, but was broken once again by Miss Jane.
Emmanuel, can Can I ask one more question?
Of course. What is it, ma'am?
Would you mind if I visited again?
Oh, sure, Miss Jane. Just, could you maybe let me know when you're coming next time?
I did knock, did I not, dearie?
Well, I mean, could you maybe call next time?
The last time I tried to use a phone was at a public phone booth, and let me just say that the event was quite a shock for the poor family nearby.
Well, then, I guess. Yeah.
I will be seeing you next Monday then, dearie.
Sounds good to me, Miss Jane.
Miss Jane uncoiled herself from the embrace, and she spread her arms and gave her signature bow one last time.
Please, dearie, call me Jane.
Exhaustion enveloped Emmanuel as he collapsed down on the couch, and before he slipped into unconsciousness, he swore he could see a faint, ghostly smile on Miss Jane's face. Dawn had broken, and Emmanuel slowly arose from the softness of his couch. He looked around the room, and he noticed that it had returned back to its original state. The Victorian-era decor that had once dotted his room was replaced with his usual plain and shabby furniture. He checked his phone, the time reading roughly 6 o'clock a.m. He wasn't due at the office until 9, so he decided to brew some coffee for himself, but as he walked into the kitchen, he found a pot of coffee waiting for him on the table. He smiled, and as he poured himself a cup of coffee, he opened his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and sent a message into the group chat he so feared earlier. As he sipped his coffee, his phone lit up with a chime, and then another, and another. He laughed and took another sip from his mug.
Thank you, Miss Jane. Thank you.
Tuesday. Night was falling now, and Emmanuel was walking through the streets of his town. His steps were uneven, and his coat was zipped halfway. But he managed to keep his footing for a while until he reached a curb and lost his balance. He tumbled onto the ground, but he laughed despite this embarrassment and rested on the sidewalk. After what felt like eons, he had finally worked up the courage to ask his friends if they wanted to meet up at Mark's place, the local bar in his town. As per usual, he was the last one to arrive, but no one seemed to care as they all got to reconnect after 5 long months. Ricky was working as a mechanic, Diane was working as a veterinarian, Kai had become a professor at a local college. Everyone had a great time, but it was clear now that Emmanuel should have asked for a ride back. He laughed, and he stood up shakily, his mind cloudy from the alcohol. He started to walk, but found himself knocked off his feet again as an unknown assailant struck him in his back. He collapsed to the ground, his breath knocked from his lungs, and he found himself staring into the barrel of a pistol. 3 men stood above him, each covered head to toe in gray sweatpants and sweatshirts. The one in the middle held the pistol while the leftmost man clenched a knife and the rightmost man a bat. Their faces were covered by shoddy ski masks, and the man with the pistol gestured with his weapon.
Empty your pockets, old man.
Motherfuck me. Ugh.
He swore silently. Emmanuel complied with the robber, adrenaline providing him with a sudden sobriety. He reached inside of his jacket and took out his wallet, phone, and house keys. The man with the bat snatched the wallet from Emmanuel's trembling hand, and he gave it to the man with the gun. He opened the wallet and threw it to the ground with disgust as he pulled only a couple of dollars out. He looked to his accomplices and looked down at the disheveled Emmanuel.
He's probably hiding the rest on him.
He took a step forward, malice lacing his voice.
You shouldn't hide things that ain't yours, old man.
Emmanuel's mind urged his legs to run, but he was grabbed around the neck and put into a chokehold. As he was yanked to his feet, his eyes turned to see the man with the bat approaching him, weapon raised and ready to strike. Emmanuel locked eyes with him, and the man gave him a cold smile as the bat winded up for a painful swing. Emmanuel closed his eyes, waiting for the blow to come. But then, he heard a familiar noise. A noise that let him know that someone was about to visit. Behind him, a door belonging to a random house on the street swung wide open, and a hand lashed out like a striking viper. The grip on Emmanuel's neck suddenly loosened as he felt a wet sensation cover the majority of his back. Emmanuel slowly looked over his shoulder and he saw the torn corpse of the man that had been restraining him, and he saw Miss Jane, her right hand shining a sickly crimson in the night. A scream pierced the air as the man dropped the bat and tried to run, fear driving his legs in a panicked rush. The man barely covered more than a few meters before Miss Jane dashed out from the doorway and grabbed him around the waist, her long fingers easily encompassing the circumference of his hip. With speed previously unseen, she grabbed the man with her other hand and tore the hapless thug in two, viscera and blood painting the walls and the road, his two halves flopped to the ground. Miss Jane gently moved Emmanuel aside, checking his face for a moment to see if he was all right. And with deliberate slowness, she turned to face the last thug. With a shout of panicked defiance, the gunman fired his weapon rapidly, each bullet impacting Miss Jane's massive frame and drawing blood in a slow trickle. After a few seconds, the weapon clicked dry, and Miss Jane spoke to the now defenseless thug, her tone merrily sadistic.
No one ever harms my guests. There is nothing more I hate than seeing good people suffer at the hands of worthless vermin like you.
She angled her head down to look at the last man, her height surpassing the streetlights that dotted the streets.
You have upset me, D.U.R.E. It's time I educate you on the essence of manners.
She slowly raised an outstretched hand towards the thug, slowly closing an open hand into a fist. Her movements were slow, deliberate, calculated. The man fell to his knees and clutched at his stomach, his body racked by unnatural convulsions. As Miss Jane's hand got tighter, the more pain the thief seemed to be in. Blood began to trickle from his mouth, and then it poured as he vomited up a red torrent. Miss Jane gripped her hand even tighter. The man's body began to cave in around his stomach, almost turning his abdomen inside out. His body looked twisted, wrong. The sounds of skin squelching and bones creaking and cracking as they broke and fractured along his spine. Even if he did survive, which is something Miss Jane would never let happen, this man's body would be irreparably damaged beyond comparison. His pained body crumpled to the ground, body squeezed and manipulated like a toothpaste tube. His arms flared in 3 separate directions, blood covering most of his leftover skin and flesh. A few seconds passed as he took his last few distressed breaths, but by then, he was already dead. In an explosion of guts and hands, 2 arms ripped out of the man's stomach, and for a moment, the arms clasped their hands together. Then the arms reached out of the man's ruined stomach. Then the arms grabbed him by the head, tore it from his body like a cork from a bottle of wine. What was left of the man fell on its side as the arms slithered back into his body, vanishing in the process. Emmanuel looked upon what remained of the thugs, every fiber numb from the shock of having seen such brutality. He turned to Miss Jane, who was wiping her hands with a handkerchief, the blood soaking into the deep maroon cloth.
Why? Why did you do this? You could have just fucking told them to leave.
Miss Jane looked at him, smoothing out the non-existent crinkles in her beautiful Victorian-era dress. For just a brief moment, Emmanuel caught a flash of yellow where her eyes would be and a vague outline of an animalistic teeth for a maw. The features faded in an instant, and Miss Jane spoke to him, her tone unbothered.
Had I done that, D.U.R.E., they would have simply found another poor soul to plunder. Plus, they wanted to hurt you, and the thought of that alone frightens me ever so much.
I know, but this and all of Jane, you can't.
Emmanuel, I do not say this lightly when I say I am not easily upset. Out of all of the people that I have encountered, a rare few have had the ability to truly anger me.
She paused and stashed the cloth away, turning to face Emmanuel.
The first person who ever did so was dear Oswald. I must say, as much as I despised him, the look of terror on his face when he saw me again was absolutely delightful, and his screams were adorable to listen to as they slowly tore his pathetic flesh from his worthless bones.
Miss Jane leaned directly over Emmanuel, her face spattered with the blood of her victims.
Please know, dearie, that I only did this because you and my other few wonderful guests are the only thing keeping me from embracing the shadows within my mind. At any moment, I could let them in, and without a second thought, I could tear my way through this town with nothing but my bare hands. But as long as I have someone to talk to, I can push back the darkness for just a little while longer.
She dabs at her face with her handkerchief, but Emmanuel knew full well she'd have to wash her face to get rid of the marks of her sins.
Anywho, enough about such trivial matters. Would you mind if I were to visit you tonight? All of this work has me feeling rather exhausted.
Yes, Jane. That would be fine. I'll see you back at my house.
Splendid, dearie. I shall see you within the hour.
Miss Jane retracted back into the building from whence the door had opened, and with a loud crack, the door had closed shut. Emmanuel took one last look at the grisly scene behind him and turned away and started walking back home. After all, Miss Jane would be visiting, and he would need to prepare for another night. Sometimes, all we need is a visit from Miss Jane. But don't forget that she needs you too. Hello! Welcome to the first ever installment of the D.U.R.E archives. My name is Minted Whispers, and I am a ASMR content creator on YouTube and Twitch, mostly on YouTube. My channel will be linked in the description, so you can go ahead and check out my work as well. But that's not what we're talking about today. This video was originally posted by me on my channel. As I'm talking and speaking to you right now, it is currently unlisted and is not visible on any site, and so you won't be able to find it normally until it is uploaded onto the D.U.R.E archives channel. I give full permission to the original creator of this installment, Goober. I'm in call with him right now. And so he and I created this series together. Once an editor, I am now a co-writer for the D.U.R.E archives. And yeah, I give full permission to him to use this video on the channel, because it will no longer be on my channel, it will be only here on this specific channel. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and let him talk and just sort of introduce himself.
Hey, hello, how's it going, everybody? First of all, just want to say thank you for watching this video. This is Goober here, and well, take a little time to introduce myself. So, I am the original creator of the D.U.R.E archives. This is a passion project that I started because I got really, I got a little bored over the summer, and I decided, you know what, I might as well just write a story, and then it turned into this. And this is something I do not want to stop anytime soon. I genuinely enjoy doing all of this, and I wanted to say thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this. It really means a lot to know that you're checking out my work. I wanted to give a huge thank you to Minted Whispers for basically, helping me bring this to life. If without their help, I wouldn't be able to get nearly as far as I am now. Uh, Seriously though, please, if you're not all the work they do really, really means a lot, and they've been a huge help being my co-writer, formerly known as my editor. And no, seriously though, what they do really means a lot. I also want to give a huge thank you to all the people who helped do the voices in my story. They are some seriously talented folks, and you all should go check them out as well. Seriously, they do an awesome job. And that's about all I have. Just wanted to say stay tuned for the future, and I promise that we will have new stories to share with you and new characters for you to meet in the future. Until then, take care, y'all.
I'd also like to take a huge thank you to Amari Luna and Frantic ASMR for being the voices of the three thugs. Thank you, Luna. And Emmanuel. Thank you so much, Frantic, for voicing him. All right. Have a good night. Bye-bye.